All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 41 of the online Rankin Technical College AWD1000 Web Development Technologies class for fall 2023. Today, what we're going to do is two things. First, we'll go over the fix, so to speak, that I put into the change calculator program to get it to work. After that, we'll take a look at, because we had one more, and that was an income tax program. So we'll do that one. And then finally, I'm going to go back and I'm going to rewrite the BMI.js and guessinggame.js JavaScript files that'll use arrow functions and event listeners. I put a starter for that in the email for today, and I'm going to end up copying that into what I'll work on in just a minute. Tomorrow will be the second hands-on test. It'll be on everything basically for chapters 1 through 5. Heaviest on 4 and 5, 4 with arrow functions and event listeners, 5 with debugging. As always, I will email you the test by 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll go over it between 8:05 and 8:20. You'll have the rest of the period to work on it, and it'll be due by midnight tomorrow night. Then on Thursday, we'll at least go over chapter 6. It's a fairly long chapter, and it's on DOM, or Document Object Model. If we have time, we'll get into 7. Otherwise, we'll get into 7 next week. It's no big thing one way or the other. All right. Friday will be a lab period, so there'll be nothing special on Friday. All right. Again, your JS hot number 2 will be taken and due tomorrow by midnight. Your chapters 4 and 5 written tests and homework, same thing, due tomorrow by midnight. And the stuff for 6 and 7, I know we haven't started going over it yet, but it won't be due for quite a while yet, half or so. All right, so with that said, I'm going to get started. And I went back. This is the GitHub repository that I made yesterday. All right, JS pretest, JS for JavaScript pretest 2 work. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to download it. All right. And I may have a copy already. I don't know on my, I may have a copy already on my desktop. We'll see in a minute. So I'm just going to, whoops, I'm going to try to extract it over there. Do that again. Like I said, I may have one already here. That looks like I did. All right, so it's JS pretest 2 work, and let's get going with that. There it is right here. That is not it. Maybe that is it. Yes, it is. All right, so this was the extra stuff, and this was 4.2 that we worked on yesterday. Let me bring it up and show you quickly what the error in here was. All right. And it was a simple error, probably why I didn't catch it. And it was caught because we had to use strict in there. All right. What the error was for pennies here, I didn't have the word. Since I did not have the word const here, nor did I have the word let, and since we used use strict, the system refused basically to recognize what it was I was trying to do. So I pretty much had the program working already. It's just that I added the word const there, and what you'll see now after doing that is if I run the program, and I like to use 93 cents because it's got one of each, so 93. And when you think about it, it should be 3/4, that's 75, 1 dime, which is 85, 1 nickel, which is 90, and 3 pennies, which are 93. And indeed, that's what you get. All right. So we went over the logic of this yesterday. I don't know if we have to again, and you have it. All right. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say about that one. So next, let's go in and let's take a look at the income tax program. All right. So let me first go out over here and let's find it. All right, page 11 there, income tax calculator. All right, so here it is. In this exercise, you'll use nested if statements. What a nested if statement is it is an if within an if. And I don't even know if I used nested ifs in here, but we had to use a lot of if statements. All right. So I guess this was a 2020 tax table, and it was a little confusing, but or maybe you found it not confusing at all. But again, it's saying that basically if you made between 0 and just about $10,000, your income tax was going to be 10%. So in other words, if you made $9,000, your income tax would be $90. If you were within this range, it would be $987.50 plus 12% of whatever you made, etc. All right. Now, a lot of people think this is unfair because, for example, you know, on this, everybody pays the same base here, even if you make millions, but you are still paying 37% of what you make over that. So let's go to that program. I'm going to close the one that I just had open for you. And we will open up 4.3. And again, I have not made a JS folder here, I guess. Thought I did, but that's okay. We'll make it right now. So JS. And I don't know if I made changes to this one or not, but we'll see in just a moment. We'll put a new file in there, which again will be our script.js file. Let's open up the index file here. Yep, and we are referencing it. Okay, now this is right now, I believe at least, is an unbelievably simplistic interface. So if we open it up, that's it. But right now, again, if I put in a number here, nothing happens because, again, we haven't written any JavaScript yet. So let's do that right now. All right. Again, just like yesterday. And of course, I think I closed it now. Yes, I did. Well, that's okay. I'll put the comment in there later. I don't want to waste anybody's time watching me copy stuff. All right, so we're in here. First thing I'm going to do again is put in my use strict. All right, and we'll put our alias in. Let me remove this. And I do want to make sure, I'm going to write the code right now, but I want to make sure you understand this. The name of this function is calculate tax. It's going to have passed into it something that's going to represent the person's income. All right. So more than anything else, it's a big if statement in here. So let's let tax, we could say income tax. I'm just going to say tax equals 0. All right. And then I'm just going to put in basically what was in that chart. So if the income is less than or equal to $9,875, that was the first thing that they put in there. The tax is equal to whatever your income is times 10%, which is 0.1, or you can put 0.10. It doesn't really matter. But that's the first tax that's in there. Else, if your income is greater than 9875 and your income is less than or equal to 40,125. So this was the second rung, so to speak, on the tax ladder. So now the tax is equal to $987.50 plus, all right, the income that you had minus 9875. And that whole thing is, or that thing is times 20 or 12%. Now, you have to be able to understand here that the way this stuff works, and we've talked about this kind of thing before, is you do what's in the parentheses first. So if I put in $40,000 as an example, which would fall within this range, I take 40,000 and subtract from there 9875, which would give me around somewhere around $30,000. Then the next thing that we do is the multiplication, because you do multiplication before you do addition. All right. So we'd have, like I said, around 30,000 times 12%. So that'd be like $360 or something like that. All right. And then we'd add the 987.50 to it. So we're going to be using this pattern all the way down now. All right. Also be real cognizant of the fact that we said here less than or equal to, and then this was equal to. You don't want to say greater than or equal to, because then it would be hit here and it would be hit here. Now it would find it here, so it would never do it there. But the point is, you want to write this correctly. Also notice in here that the way that this is written is we're using whole numbers. So in other words, if somebody makes $9,875, they're going to be in here. But if they make $9,875.10, they're going to be in here. All right. So it's all based on what that income is. All right. Right. And again, you can see that these are fairly simple in that what we're doing in here every time is just one line inside of each one of the else ifs. You'll also remember, or hopefully you remember, that in a much earlier program, I showed you that there was an alternative to using a bunch of else ifs, and that was a switch statement. That wouldn't work here. You wouldn't use this. You have to list every possibility. And when you think about it, that would be hundreds, really thousands of possibilities. So you wouldn't want to do that. oops, not two mistakes there. Of course, and I spelled income wrong. I really should be putting semicolons at the end of each one of these. I guess I've got them in most of them. Do not ever, at the end of an if or an else if, do not ever put a semicolon at the end. All right, that's one way to make sure your code doesn't work. And then the last one. So the idea when you look through this is if it's anything less than that, so that'll cover 9875 and less, and this will cover 518,400 and greater. So we should have everything in the number sphere covered. And then when we're done, we want to return that tax, but it might be a big number for decimal. So we'll do a 2 fixed on here to 2 decimal places. All right. Now, that was written, and it was written as an arrow function, but we don't have any event listener yet. So it's not going to do much of anything right now. Plus, there's nothing calling it. All right. So the next thing we were told to put in there, or the next thing I'm going to put in there, is this process entry. And again, process entry will also be an arrow function. It requires, as you can see, no parameters. All right. All right. So in other words, what is this doing? Well, it should be obvious, hopefully. Get income from associated text box. Next thing we have to do is validate the income that was inputted. So if it's not numeric, or the income is less than or equal to 0. All right, now that's according to their specifications. I would have said less than 0. I mean, it's possible. I don't know why someone who had no income would be filing income tax or figuring out tax. It doesn't make sense. But okay, so if that's the case, we're going to have an alert. All right, just give it a simple message right here. And basically, if that's the case, we're done. All right. Otherwise, well, what do we know? When you do this, even though we did a parsed float on here, all right, we're going to redo it and set it to a parse int. All right. Do you have to do that? No, it'll still work if you do it without this line of code, but that's typically is going to be how it's done. All right. And we could, they even have, there is a rounding function that they have in JavaScript that we could even round it. I mean, I suppose I don't think the IRS would come after you if you made, let's say, $90,000 and 57 cents, and you only pay taxes on 97,000. I don't think that they would complain about that. So there is my function call right there. And we know it has to be valid, because if it was invalid, we would do the alert. So if it's valid, we're going to do this. All right. But regardless, then, we'll give, we'll give the income the focus. All right, we're almost done, but we have to add the event listener. Okay, and that's not much. It's about 5 or 6 lines. So first, we will add the event handler. All right. And again, hopefully, at least by now, this is making some sense to you. This says, basically, once the program is loaded and the document object model content has been created and loaded, then whenever you click the button, or whenever you click something with an ID of calculate, and if we look over there, that's our button. All right, it's over here someplace. Here it is, right there. So when you click that, again, what we're telling it to do is to run this process entry that you just saw up here. All right, plus the last thing that we want to do is we want to make sure move the focus to the income text box. All right, so we did this once before. In fact, I can copy it from right here. All right, let's save it and let's run it. All right, we'll put nothing in there, and we get income must be greater than 0. So 0 should do the same thing. So should a negative number. All right, again, if I put in there 9,000, the tax is 900, which is 10%. That's what we thought. All right, if we change it to 90,000, oh, something's goofed up. So let's see if we can find out what that is. Wow. All right. Cannot read properties of null for the focus. All right. But this right here is not a function. So that probably is the first place to start, is on our JavaScript file in line 15. Well, and if you look at it, what do we have here? Well, notice in line 15, we have two parentheses. Somehow when I did that, rather than putting a plus sign there, I must have hit the paren. All right, so that's the first thing. All right. Is anything else wrong or not? But we'll find out in just a second. Now, see, tax, income, did I spell? I'm just looking to see if I spelled anything wrong, but we'll find out right now. So again, we put in 900 and it came back with 90. All right, if we change it to 90,000, it's now 900. That I don't know if that's, well, that's, come back here and do that. There we go. That looks a little bit better. 900,000. Now, if I was actually doing this, all right, I would have a whole bunch of practice values to go in there. I'm fairly confident right now that works. All right, I mean, if I put in 100,000 right here and I click calculate, all right, that sounds like it'd be about right, that you'd pay around 20,000 in taxes. Now, could that be wrong? Yes, but I don't think it is. All right, so again, taking a quick look at this. Now, when we look at here, it says in line 47, cannot read properties of null reading focus. All right, so it doesn't like it right there. All right. Looks like I forgot a pound sign right there. All right. It's so easy to, screw things up when you're doing this. And I'm proving that every period. So if I come back here, and if it's wrong there, it's wrong here as well. So that should have a pound income right there. And that should have a pound income right there. All right. And if we run this one last time, okay, so again, if I just put in calculate, and now if I go and inspect and I go to console, you'll notice that there's no errors in there. Plus, you may or may not have noticed, but when we started running this, all right, and if I refresh, my cursor is right there. It's kind of hard to see, but it is blinking. All right, so that is that example. All right, now this morning, what I sent everybody this morning, let me close this. All right, so we've now gone through all the ones for chapters 2 through 4 in the extra, and we've gone through in the short, we've gone through the 2 through 5. All right. Now, I believe probably was a little bit redundant because I think I'd already sent you this. All right. But I did make some changes to it. In other words, right now, this is what you see when you bring it up. All right. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay, but there's no home page, there's no about page. I added those yesterday, just put some garbage kind of stuff out there. But the BMI right now doesn't do anything because there's no JavaScript. The guessing game right now doesn't do anything right now because there's no JavaScript. All right, I'll just work with the one that I gave you yesterday. All right, so I'm going to bring this up right here. So this is, again, this is JS pretest for the class. Okay. So let's go in and open that in code, and we'll write both of these right now. All right. Doesn't matter which one we start with. We don't have anything in here anyway. So this one, we'll just do it first because it's the first one listed. Looks like I've got an extra div there. I'm going to remove that. And I'm going to line this up a little bit better. I didn't have to do that. It does nothing as far as making the program run any better. But it says we need bmi.js. So I'm going to add that to begin with. So it'll be a new file here, bmi.js, right? So with that said, I'll just start keying stuff in. Now, in what I gave you this morning, all right, I gave you all of the constants and I gave you all of the variables, but I'll just rekey them in. It's no biggie. It's not that much code to key back in. All right, so we've got both of our files here. Let me close that and start. All right, I'll start with, make alias. So again, that'll be our const $. And I am going to put a comment in here just so you know. All right. This is make it easier for us if we test later. So if you've got a BMI of less than 18.5, you are underweight. If you've got a BMI that is greater than or equal to 18.5, but less than 25, you are of optimal weight. If you've got a BMI that is greater than or equal to 25, but less than 30, you are overweight. Finally, if you've got a BMI that is greater than or equal to 30, you are obese. Again, according to the statistics that they have given you right there. All right, so we've got all that. Let's close the comment off. All right, and start writing code. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the program constants. And again, this is how I did it. All right. Now I'm more old school, but in most programming languages, for example, those of you who will take the C# class in spring, when we create constants, we'll always make them uppercase. So whenever I create my own programmatic constants, all right, things like, maximum height, maximum weight, I make them uppercase. And I know I've mentioned this before, but these values that I'm using here, they're just, I just kind of pulled them out of the air. All right, there's nothing significant to them. They're just, what I decided on. That's all. All right. This we'll use later again that I called min optimal. And that is equal to 18.5. So those are all of our constants. So we're expecting a height between 12 inches or 1 foot and 96 inches or 8 feet, and a weight between 1 pound and 777 pounds. All right, that min optimal right there, this. All right, that min over, that's this. And that min obese, that's it. It'll just make our code a little bit more readable. Plus, if those numbers change in the future, I only have to change them right here where I've declared the constants. All right. I also have about 6 or 7 variables. So not that I need this, but so these will be my constants. And then down here, these will be my variables. And that's not really well put just because of the fact, just so you know, a constant is a variable, but it's a variable that typically once set cannot change. All right. Now, when we get to a later chapter and we talk more about arrays in depth, you actually can change the value of an array constant. I don't want to get into it right now because I have no desire to confuse people. All right. So let's put in these variables. I'm not even sure I used all of them, but we'll look, and if I didn't, we can remove them. Now, originally put in the, but I changed it afterwards from status to BMI status. Status is sometimes in some languages it's a keyword, and it depending on the editor that you use. All right, if I brought this up in a different editor and I called it status, it would give it a brownish color, meaning it's a keyword. All right, so I just called it BMI status. Now look at these. Is valid basically is going to mean that you put in a valid height and you put in a valid weight. All right. Now I've got the status and I've got BMI, or I've got BMI status. I don't know if I'm going to need both of those. I'll probably get rid of one of them. All right. I may or may not need the result. These should make sense. This is the height you're going to input. So it's going to grab it out of the text box. This is the weight that, again, you're going to grab out of a text box. This will be the BMI, which will be calculated. All right. Now, if you look on here, you'll notice when you look, so there's the height, there's the weight, and somewhere in here is the BMI. All right. And BMI label, I don't know, but it'll be in there someplace, their BMI. So it's in here somewhere. Now, I didn't do this. Oh, I did. There we go. But I was going to say, we might as well make that disabled. What that means is the user can't change it. So once they've figured out an actual BMI or body mass index, that can't change. And this is disabled also because if your BMI, for example, would be 35, you'd be obese. You couldn't change it. You wouldn't want to let the user change it. So yeah, you got a BMI of 35, but your optimal weight. So I made them both disabled. All right. So you can write this again in a lot of different ways. But what we were told to do was we were told that what we wanted to do, at least, was we wanted to write this using arrow functions and using arrow functions and using event listeners. Okay. Now, the first arrow function I wrote was called calculate the BMI, and I probably should have broken this down into a bunch of functions because it's fairly large. Again, there's nothing passed into it, as you can see. I'm going to copy this because the next one is the weight, which is the exact same thing, except changing the H's to W's. All right. So right now I have attempted to take what was put into the first text box and put it into an integer. I have attempted to take what is in the second text box and put that into an integer. Now, that may or may not work, so I've got to validate. All right. Now, if I wanted to, all right, maybe it would have been cleaner. This isn't the way I did it in mine, but I'm going to do it like this here. So I'm going to come in right here and I'm going to immediately validate that the height, number one, is numeric. All right, just on a couple lines. So number one, that it's numeric, and number two, that it's within range. And the good news is, after I write this, I'm going to copy it down here because it'll basically be the same thing again, except changing the H in height to W in weight. All right, so if the height is not a number, or the height is less than the min height, all right, or the height is greater than the max height. And I can put that over multiple lines if I want to or need to, but those are my checks. There's my numeric check. There's range check 1. There's range check 2. So if it's not numeric, or it's less than 1, I'm sorry, less than 12, or it's greater than 96. What do I want to do? All right. Well, basically, the validation failed because of one of those things. So I'm going to set the status, and that's going to be another text box that's in there that's literally called status. I'm sorry, the status. All right. And I'm going to set its value to OOR height. And all that means is out of range height. And then I'm going to type in return all by itself. And the reason for that is after I put in a failure message, there's no sense in going on. All right. So if I get down to right here, I put in a valid value for the height. I put in a number, and that number was between 12 and 96. So I'm going to grab my whole thing right here, copy it to the clipboard, paste it in, and now I want to validate that the weight is numeric and is within range. There's always a problem when you do a lot of copy and pasting that you forget one. That's a really easy way to introduce logic errors. So if I had not changed this, for example, then it would have been weight less than the min height. So it would have been less than 12 as opposed to 1. All right. So now I've gone in and I have checked everything. Okay. Okay. And again, if there was a problem, I can return. Now, if I get down to here, and this should make sense to everyone, if I get down to here, in fact, let's put a comment here. Height was valid. Now, validate the weight. All right. And if I get down to here, let me just grab this. What do I know? Well, I know the height was valid, and I also know that the weight input was valid. So in other words, what I'm ready to do now is I'm ready to come in and calculate the BMI. All right, because I've got a valid height and I've got a valid weight. All right, now you don't have to do this, okay, but we've got a thing here that was called the status. Let's make sure that that was the name of it in here. So notice in here, we've got just status. So I'm going to change that to the status right there. All right. That should be the status right there. Okay. So the status is going to be right now, we might as well make it empty. I'm going to make sure that there's nothing in there. We're about to figure out what the status is. All right. And really that's the status, but we also, what do we have here for the BMI? What did we call the BMI? Result. Okay, so we can set that to nothing as well. Now, do we have to do this? No. But I'm going to come in here and put in result dot value equals nothing, and the status dot value equal nothing. And the reason I'm doing that is just to make sure if there's any junk in there from a previous programming run, it's now gone. All right. And I know I can do that, because again, if I had errors, I returned here or I returned here. So I know that it's valid, but I haven't figured out yet what the result is and what the status is. All right, so let's figure out that result right now. And this is not my formula. This is a formula, I think, from the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say result equal weight divided by. Now I want to show you something. And if you don't understand it, it's totally okay. What I want to do in here is say height times height. And that is totally legitimate. There's nothing at all wrong with saying that. And then it's times 703. But I want to show you another way that this can be written. All right. So I'm going to make a copy of it and I'm going to write it the other way. All right. Up here, but I'm just going to comment it out. So another way to write height times height is to put in here this math times pow height 2. Now you might say, fine, what did that buy me? In this case, it bought you almost nothing. But imagine that it was height raised to the 5th power. I don't really want to say height times height times height times height times height when I can just change that then to a 5. All right. This is an example of using what's called a built-in class in JavaScript. The built-in class is called math, and it has a power function, exponentiation function, whatever you want to call it. So this says run the power function. It says take height and raise it to the 2nd power. So square it, which is basically what we're doing here. So either one of these will work, but I just wanted to show you that there's more than one way of doing the same thing. Now we have a result. So I'm going to put result in associated text box. In fact, rather than result, I'm going to say put BMI, which is result. All right. So this right now is equal to, okay, well, that's really, I call it result here. And what did we call it up above? Well, we've got BMI here. So I think we should actually use that variable because it is the BMI. So that's going to take whatever we just figured out, and it's going to put it in that result text box. Now, we're not done though, because we also have to set the BMI status. We could do all of that in here, but I did write another routine to do that. So set the BMI status. What that's going to do is it's going to look at the BMI and using these parameters, it's going to figure out if the person's underweight, optimal weight, overweight, or obese. I didn't work with the counters in here. I didn't see the need to add that stuff. It's already a big enough program. It's going on to 100 lines here. So I'm going to now put that in. So const set the BMI status. All right. Again, it'll have nothing passed into it. And it's going to return the BMI status. So first, if the BMI is less than 18.5. Well, we don't use that number because, again, we came in here and we said if BMI is less than min optimal. I don't know, I keep writing that. Optimal. All right. Then the status is equal to underweight. So there's the first one. Else, if the BMI is greater than or equal to min optimal, which is, again, 18.5, and the BMI is less than min over, which means that it's greater than or equal to 18.5 and it's less than 25. Then the status equals optimal weight. All right. Else, if the BMI, now we have to check for the next one. So if it's greater than or equal to min over, which means it's greater than or equal to 25, and it's less than 30, which we called min obese. If that's the case, we know that the status is equal to overweight. All right. Otherwise, the status is obese. All right. So that is basically just about everything. Now, we have a problem right now if we ran it because we're never displaying the status. We went up here and we displayed the BMI, but we never displayed the status. So I'm going to grab that line from up there. And now I can say the status dot value equal, well, what we just set it to, which was the status. All right. Now there's two more things that we have to do here. Number one, we want to make a clear routine that's going to clear everything out. And then we finally have to add our event listeners. All right, it'll take 5 to 10 minutes, then we'll take a break. So I'm going to come in here, const, I just called it clear all, and it's going to be another arrow function. And it's meant to clear everything out. So when you think about it, what do we want to clear out? Our height text box, our weight text box, our result text box, which holds the BMI, our status text box, which has underweight, overweight, etc. We can set the focus back to the height because that's the first text box. But I also came in and took all the variables that I used, height, weight, BMI, and the status, all of those, and I set them. So I set height, weight, and BMI to 0, and I set the status equal to the empty string. All right, so that's clearing out the variables. And that was a text field, so I set it to the equal string. Okay, and now I want to clear out the text boxes. And let's just copy this. So we have height, we have weight, we have result, we have the status, And then finally, one last thing. All right, setting the focus to the height text box. You don't have to do that, but it's a little nicety. So height dot focus. All right. So there's one more thing we have to do now, and that is to add our event listeners. And I added two of them, one for the calculate button and one for the clear button. Okay. See here, add, set, whatever you want to call it. Now, just you didn't have to do this, but I did this too. EVT. I wanted the event in there. And all that event is it gives you a lot of information about whatever it is you're working on. All right, we don't have to worry about it right now. I just wanted to introduce it so you saw it. All right, so this is calculate the BMI. All right, so again, that says find something with an ID of calculate. That's our button. When that is clicked, okay, we want you to call calculate the BMI. In much the same way with the other one, with the other button that's in here. I think that button was called clear form. All right. Now I just keyed it in and I'm not sure if it'll work, but it should. And if I have mistakes, you're going to see them right when I do. But again, you'll notice about 110 lines of code. All right. Well, that's a good start. Now, if I click it and there's nothing in there, okay, nothing happened. So evidently I keyed in something incorrectly. All right. Cannot read properties of null. Well, we've had that one many times before, and it looks like it's on line 33 and 105, which is down near the bottom. So let's look first at 33. Height equal parse int. Let height, that should be okay. Let's double check and make sure they should have been called height and weight. There's weight. So there's the ID of weight. There's height. And there's the ID of height. Well, I'll tell you what, it is 9:04. Let's take a break till 9:15, or you can watch me attempt to see if I can figure out what the error is during that time. We'll pick it up at 9:15. Hopefully I'll have it fixed, and then we'll go through the other one, which is the guessing game. I'll see you in 11 minutes. There's one error. We're on a break, Joshua. We'll be back in about 5 more minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, it is 9:15, so I'm going to continue on, and it's working. So let me show you where my errors were. First, in the here where the BMI is, I probably should have just called this BMI, but I called it result, not the result, but result. So in my code where I tried to a result, it was giving me errors. All right, so that was the first problem. Fix that, and then started working on it from the top. This message, when I had height inputted out of range, weight inputted out of range, was too wide for the text box I was putting it in. So I removed the word inputted from both of these. All right, next. When I did this line right here, line 33, I didn't have a pound sign there. It's another good way to get one of those no reference errors. Also, since I didn't have it there and I copied it here, I had an error there as well. All right. So fixing those did a lot of work towards getting this to work. All right. I originally commented this out, these two lines, because they were giving me errors on them. And it wasn't that they were. This line was an error because, again, I called it result back in here instead of the result. Okay. All right. So now I could uncomment those. I was having a problem with the BMI. So I put in just basically a debug alert that said the calculated BMI. So you'll notice that now when I come in here and I run this, and I put in, for example, now I get that, the calculated BMI. All right, but it does. I went and cut it down to 2 decimal places and everything is working. When I click reset, that should clear, that should clear, that should clear, that should clear. My variables should all be reset to 0 and my cursor should be flashing right there. And you'll notice that it is. All right, so virtually everything that's in here now is working. All right. This, like I said, I put it in just as a debug. In fact, a lot of times what I will do, you don't ever have to do this, of course, but I'll put in here something, and I want to, so as I'm testing it, if I want to see what the value of something is, I'll be able to. So again, that is the first problem. That is the BMI one, and it is now working. All right. So now I'm going to write the other one. So I'm going to close bmi.html and I'm going to close bmi.js and I'm going to bring up game.html, which is supposed to call game.js. I don't have a game.js right now, so I'm going to make one. Right? And again, so we've got our HTML file right here. It's flagging right now 2 things as being wrong. So again, I don't know how I did that, but I've got an extra div in there. I'm going to again move this over so things are lined up a little bit better. Yeah, I can do it one more time. There we go. And it's still showing one thing in here as being in error. Well, notice I've got name equal guess here and I've got name equal guess there. So I'm putting it in twice. All right, not showing me any errors in here. So let me do a file save all and let's start to write the game.js. All right, and you're going to notice that in some ways it's going to be similar. All right, so we'll start off with making our alias. I won't even put a comment this time, and let's move this over. Right? So first, we'll put in our constants. That's going to be the minimum allowable guess will be 1, and we'll have a maximum allowable guess, and that'll be 100. So if you enter nothing, or you enter something, try to enter something that's non-numeric, or you come in and you try to enter something that's greater than 100 or less than 1, it's not going to be allowed. It's not a valid guess. If you look in here, you'll notice, and I did this on the BMI program too, we only have the one input here. So I made it of type number. That means I don't have to, I have to check for empty output, basically, but it's not possible for somebody to put something non-numeric in there other than blank. All right. Okay. So I've got our minimum guess and our maximum guess, and I made a few more things in here. I have another one, and that's going to be equal to this. I'll tell the user no guess was made. So they didn't make a guess. So in other words, they came in when you ran the program and you put nothing there, but you guessed. So again, when we look at this, we said make guess, but there's no guess in there. All right, so that'll handle that. No guess was made. This will say was too high. That'll mean that you made, let's say that the random number was 50 and you guess 60. Well, your guess is, it's going to say the number, that guess was too high. All right. Looking at it the other way, if the number was 60 and you said 50, then the guess was too low. You didn't have to do these. I just did it because I wanted to write it right there. All right. Now, what if if it was 50 and you guessed 50, then your guess was correct. All right. And then finally, I made one more constant that I called GOOR, guess out of range, equals, and it'll say out of range, less than 1 or greater than 100. So those are the constants that I set up for the program. And you'll notice too, just so you see this, in my constants, they're all, what's around all of them is are double quotes. We could have used single quotes. However, especially for those of you next semester who will be in the C# class, you use a single quote for something else in C#. Constants are used with strings and with double quotes. That's why I typically use double quotes almost always, all right, in JavaScript. So those are my constants, and I'm going to have my variables, all right, and there's a few of them. This will be the random number. This will be the guess I just made. This will be the total number of guesses. All right, this will be whether or not it's valid. So it'll be a Boolean variable. And we'll say true. We'll assume that you made a valid guess. And again, this will be the status. And it's equal to nothing. So when you think about it, and again, I mentioned this before, so if you didn't hear the lecture on the first part, a constant is technically a special type of variable whose value is not really meant to change while the program is running. All right. What I've done right there, you'll see a lot of code where you'll make constants and they're not uppercase. All right. But these are my programmatic constants and I made them uppercase. Now, what you'll notice, those of you who next semester will take the AWD1111 database driven website development 1, most of the constants you write in there will not be uppercase, even though they're JavaScript constants. We'll get into that at that time. These are variables, so again, whose value can change. All right. Now, just to show you this, all right, just to show you this, all right, I put the add event listener up above where I made the call. If you say, what do you mean? Well, just watch. So here I'm going to add the make your guess event listener. All right. So, and what's make guess? Well, if I go back here and I look at my button, there it is. That's make guess. So this is associated with me clicking the button to make a guess. So when it's clicked, and again, I didn't have to do this, but I said EVT, so I'm passing that event object. And if that confuses you, just pretend it's not even there and don't use it. It's totally fine. All right. But I'm going to say here, make your guess. Now, what should hopefully be starting to at least somewhat sink in with you is this is saying, find whatever has an ID of make your guess. Well, it's our button. When you click that button, call this routine. That's all this is saying. But we don't have the routine, so we're going to write that next. And I'm going to put it right underneath. Okay, so const make your guess equal. All right. And here, well, if the random number, we're going to end up resetting this every time. If it's equal to 0, we need to generate a new random number. So if the current value of rand num is 0, 0, generate a new random number. Okay. And the way you do that, and I literally took this right out of W3 schools, rand num equals math.floor math.random times 100 plus 1. Now, I'm not even going to be silly enough to say, does that make sense? Or is that clear? Or is it clear as mud? So let's just talk about what that is literally doing. Okay, this right here, that creates a random number that is, just so you know, I'll remove this in a minute, but it's greater than or equal to 0 and it's less than 1. That's literally what math.random in any programming language, that's what it does. So let's assume for a second that the number that it generated was 0.34567,890, something like that. Then we take that number that we just generated, that, and we multiply it by 100. So now it is 34.567890. So now we've got that. Then we say math.floor, not math.ceil for ceiling. So that says remove any decimal place. So now it's 34. So that's the number that was generated. Then we add 1 to it, making it 35. Now, what confuses people, at least at times, is, okay, I can even sort of get that. Why are you adding 1 to it? Because it can generate a random number that is 0. And if it's 0, 0 times 100 is 0, plus 1 would give you 1. All right. So like I said, that's, hopefully that made at least a little bit of sense to you. Okay, so I'm coming in here and I've now generated my random number. Well, that's good. I've got to start. And now I'm going to say guess equal All right, which means your guess is the value in the box. So again, if you didn't put anything in there, it's going to be an error, of course. If you put in a number less than 1 or a number greater than 100, it's going to be an error. If you put in a number between 1 and 100, it's going to be a valid guess. All right, so I've got to basically validate now. All right, I've got to validate that a guess was made. All right, so let me move this up. So if guess equal nothing, there was no guess made. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the box that tells me what that value is. I'm going to set that, which is guess status. Did I call it guess status up here? The status. Well, that's okay. I don't think I have a guess status. So we will make this the status. That's fine. So the status dot value equals NGM. NGM is what I set up here, and it's no guess was made. Okay. Well, I'm done because when I say I'm done, there's nothing else to do because no guess was made. So I'm just going to return. There's no sense in going on. Okay. But if I get down to here, a numeric guess was made. We don't know if it's valid or not. We don't care. So I'm going to call figure guess status. Oops. All right. So call figure guess status. Okay. And we can go in and we can do, right now, this is not being called from a button. So we can write it right down below. So const figure guessed status. All right. And what does that have to do? Well, it has to first check and make sure that that guess was within range. Now, I could have checked that here too. All right. I just checked it down here for figure guess status, but I could have come up here where I checked it empty. So I could have put an else in there, and I could have said else if guess is less than min guess or guess is greater than max guess. All right. Or I could have even made a compound check in here, but I wanted this to say no guess made, and I wanted the other one to say guess out of range. This is just the way that I did it. All right. And I'm not saying it's the best way or the worst way. It's the way. I have never in my life claimed, hey, I wrote this program and it was the best way that this could be done. All right. So again, I want to validate the guess was within range. In other words, it was greater than or equal to 1, and it was less than or equal to 100. All right. So the guess was less than our minimum, or our guess was greater than the maximum, we know it's out of range. You have made an illegal guess, so to speak. So I'm going to grab these two lines. And now the status, it's not no guess made. It's GOOR, which means guess out of range. And again, I can return. Why? There is no sense in going on. All right, so I have checked. This is my one check for an invalid guess. This is my other check for an invalid guess. So if I get down here, a valid guess was made. All right. What does that mean? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thing with my status and I'm going to set, just in case there was something else in there previously, I'm going to clear that out. All right. But I now have made a valid guess. Now, the way this game is played right now is if I keep guessing the same number, it'll allow me to do it. So I put in 37, it says it's too high. I put in 37, it says it's too high. I put in 37, it says it's too high. We could write more code that every time you make a guess, it puts it into a number array. And then you could check that number array and you could say to them basically, the number 37 has already been guessed. That would be a little more work, but it's something you could add to the program. All right. But what I'm going to say right here is plus plus tote guesses. All right. So in other words, a valid guess was made. So number one, clear out the guess status text box. I guess clear out is weird. It should just be clear. And second, increment the total number of guesses. Okay, and that's what I'm doing right there. All right, now what I want to do is I want to check. I want to check right now, and I want to see, I want to check to see if one, the guess was too high, two, the guess was too low, or three, the guess was correct. Now, one thing about this, I could put this in any order I wanted, but I would not recommend checking first to see if the guess was correct. When you play the game to begin with, you've got a 1 out of 100 chance of guessing it right. All right. But if I am constantly checking whether or not it's correct, it's only going to be correct once, and it's going to be incorrect 99 times. So I'm going to make that check last. All right. Whether you do the too high or too low next is up to you. Since I put it in this order, too high, too low, correct, I'll do the too high first. So if guess is greater than the random number, again, in other words, we made too high a guess. All right. Then I'm going to change the value of the status. And that's going to be let's see, I'm looking here and I'm looking at my own code right now. And we called the guess, we just called it guess, I believe. Yeah, yes. So I'm going to say guess plus WTH. So for instance, if I say 37, it should say 37 was too high. All right. Else, if the guess is less than the random number, then the guess was too low. So I've now checked two of the three possibilities. Else, we got it correct. All right. So our guess was correct. So either our guess was too high, or our guess was too low, or our guess is correct. And again, if it's correct, then we will say your guess was correct. All right. Now, we're almost done, to be honest with you, but let's finish this up. I wrote a note here that I called clear the form. So let's do here we did the add event listener first up above it. The order in which you put these doesn't matter, but we did the add event listener, okay, for this, and then we did the actual function. All right, we could do it in that order, but let's just to show you, let's put it in the other order. All right, so we will write the function first, and then we will put the event listener after it. All right, so const, again, I called it clear the form. That'll clear out my one text box. That will clear out the other text box. Probably should have them in the other order, but it doesn't really matter. All right. The actual guess value itself, I'll set that back equal to 0. All right. And let's see. I'll give the guess the focus. Technically, I don't even have to do this one right here. I'm going to get rid of that. We can do it. It won't hurt anything, but we'll set the focus. And again, just to be complete, I will change the order of these two. All right, so that's everything for that. Now let's add the event listener. Should really have commas at the end, or semicolons at the end of all these. Not there. But anytime you make a function like this, should have a semicolon at the end. And if it doesn't like it, it's going to complain, then I'll remove them. All right, so here's adding the event listener. All right. So we want to just call, was it clear the form? All right. So finally, what's left? Well, we need to generate the event listener if we want to have a new game, because there's also something in there. There's a button that's called new game. So if you look, if I run this, don't worry, I don't want to check it yet. We've now got this handled, make guess. We've now got this handled, clear form, but we don't have this handled for new game. So let's write that one right now. All right. And again, I'm just going to basically do everything right in the event listener. I'm not going to write another routine because it's only 2 or 3 lines, just to show you again, there are other ways of doing this. So I'm going to grab this. And this is going to be my event listener, and I'm going to call this just new game. All right. So when I click that button that says new game, this is what I want to have happen. Right? Well, what's that? What do I want to have happen? All right. Well, the first thing is I want to generate a random number. All right. So I'm going to grab the same line of code that I grabbed before, this one. Okay. Now, just so you're aware of this. What would be a cleaner way of writing this? Well, let me grab this line of code here, and I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to call generate random number right there. All right, then down below this, I'm going to put in const generate random number. All right. And now I'm going to paste in that line of code. Now, what did that buy me? Not a lot, except now I'm calling it from right here. And I can also call it from right here. That's why you write functions. That's one of the reasons. So that if you have repetitive code, you can call it from a multiple number of places. Now, did that buy me a lot? Not at all. I mean, it was the whole thing was, 2 or 3 lines. But you start to see, hopefully, as a programmer, that saving 2 or 3 lines here does add up over time. I mean, I've already taken programs that I have had and have cut them down, 30% as far as the size goes by doing things like that. That's also known as refactoring your code. All right. So I'm going to call clear the form, and that'll clear everything out. All right. So in other words, that'll grab whatever was in that guess right there. I don't know what this is. All right. And it'll take all of my text boxes, both of them, I guess. Let's see what's in there. 2 text boxes. It'll take both of those and clear them. And then it'll put my focus right here. All right. So that yes was cleared. The status was cleared. What was the other one called? What I want to do, I'm just trying to be good here. That's guess status, and that's total guesses. Okay, that's fine. So there's the guess, there's the guess status, and there's the total guesses. All right, so we call that total guesses. So one thing I'd really like to do whenever I'm going to not clear the form, but whenever I start a brand new game, one of the things I want to do, not just clear the form, but I want to set total guesses back equal to 0 because I'm starting a new game. All right. And I want to also make sure that in that text box itself, the one that's called total guesses, or is it total guesses or total guesses? Total guesses. I want to make sure that that is set to empty. Now I'm looking at this. I'm going to guess when I run this, it may or may not work, but I'm going to guess there's a mistake in it because there's an omission in here. But we'll see that in just a minute. All right. I don't know if in here I am ever saying the total number of guesses. All right. So up here where I did all this stuff, you're too high, you're too low, or you got it correct. I also want to make sure that in here I'm going to display the current total number of guesses. I've never done that. So all right. Well, let's see what we've got. It's probably not going to run, but we're going to try it anyway. All right. So guess 50 right in the middle. And nothing happened. All right. Well, the same thing in here with the null string. And there's two of them, lines 84 and 59. So let's take a look at both of those. Start with line 59. The status dot value, that actually looks okay. The status dot value. So that's telling me that the error should be somewhere between line 1 and line 59. All right, so I'm going to quickly browse through this and see if I missed anything. I'm going to remove this EBT because I'm not using it. So yeah, I'll leave it there. That's not what the error is. Yes. Yeah, I'm going to change this from random equal to the word return. So I am actually giving it a number. I'm looking for something that looks like it's wrong and I don't see it right now. So let's see. This was clear the form. Is that what we called? No, it's called clear form. So that is an error. That has to be clear form here. So let's see if that fixed anything. Still getting an error. Well, it's down to 1. And now it's on, again, it's line 59, which isn't good. Let's click on it. Now, normally when it's because I don't have the pound sign there, but it is there. But it very well could be that it's missing someplace earlier. So I'm going to look for that. So it's complaining about this line. Do I have something in here called the status? I thought I checked and I did. No, the status is in here. But we're using it here. Okay. So our status, there's the guess. There's the guess status. Well, notice it's called guess status. It's not called the status. It is now. All right, 50 was too high, and there's been one guess. Let's put in something out of range. Nothing in there. No guess was made. Let's put in something, and notice I did not increment my guesses. Out of range, did not increment my guesses. Again, out of range, did not increment my guesses. The clear works. All right, so 50 was too high, so let's try 25. That was too high. 12. That was too high. 6. That was too high. 3. That was too high. 1. Okay, something's wrong. 1 was too high. Doesn't like something I'm doing. All right, that's okay. But that's a logic error, as you can tell, because when I look at this now, it's not showing me any errors. So I have a logic error in here. All right, which means I should go look in my JavaScript. So if the guess was less than 1 or the guess was greater than 100, okay. It's greater than the random number was too high, less than the random number was too low. That looks correct. So where I went back and rewrote this, let's make sure that it is generating a random number. How do I do that? I'm going to come in here and do this. I'm going to say const r for random number equals this. All right. And I'm going to do an alert that says the random number was r. And now I can return r. I just want to see if it's generating a random number or not. All right. So we'll run this. The random number was 49. If I do it, I should get another one, 63, 82, etc. So it's 82. So let's try 82. All right. Well, boom, it's just calling it and calling it and calling it. All right. It's never checking it. So it says 82 is too high because it called this twice. So there's a bug in my logic in here. All right. So let's try it one more time. I'm going to do a new game. All right. And the number is 35. All right. So I'm going to guess here 25 and make my guess. And you'll notice it's already called this again. So there's an error in there. All right. So when I'm figuring my guess status, yeah. In here, make your guess. If the random number is 0, we're calling generate random number. Well, it shouldn't be 0. It should be something. So it really shouldn't be hitting this again, but it's creating a new random number every single time I'm making a guess. All right. Right now, I'm not sure what the problem is. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to give you 10 minutes and I'm going to look through the code from top to bottom and see what I'm screwing up. So come back, please, at 10:10, and we'll try to wrap this up at that time. All right, it is 10:10, so I'm going to finish this up, show you very quickly where my error was. And that was in this generate random number function. It was in here. All right. And what it was I had, this was all okay. I just changed it around so I could see the random number when it was generated. But right here where I made that check, I needed to say random equals generate random number. Now, two things about this. First of all, I put a cheat in here. What do I mean? Well, when you run the game now and you click new game, it shows you what the number is right away. So, I mean, you could keep winning, but while you're testing, that might not be a bad thing to do. You know, you don't want to sit there and check and check and check, etc. But all I have to say right here is return. All right, I can get rid of all this stuff. And it should still work. I'll check it in a moment. All right. The other thing I wasn't doing was when we started a new game, I also wasn't saying random. I was just calling generate random number. But we need a new random number. So that should be working now. So let's see. I've removed the thing out of there that gave you the answer. So let's save it all. And again, 50 is always a good guess because it's right in the middle. I'm doing what's called a halving type of thing, HALVING. And I'm doing a special kind of search. So in other words, I say 50 and I make my guess. That was too high. So I've eliminated 51 numbers already. It's got to be between 1 and 49. So I cut it in half again and I say 25. And it says too low. So I know it's between 26 and 49. I add those two up, I get 75. So I'll guess, and that was too high. So I know it's between 26 and 36. So again, I'll check 31, which is right in the middle. And it was correct. I got it in 4 guesses. But now notice if I clear the form, everything clears. Well, actually that should have cleared and it's not. But when I do a new game, now everything does. So I got to check that and make sure that my total guesses is clearing. But I now have a new number. All right. So now if I put in 50, it says it was too low. So you know I'm playing a new game. Plus my guesses have been reset to 1. All right, I'll do it again. So I'll clear the form. And again, 75. Too high. So it's between 51 and 74. All right, it's between 51 and 59. All right, so you see I'm guessing it in around 4 guesses. All right, my clear form is working except for that. I got to check on that. And the new game is working. So let's see on the clear form. All right, I've got guess and I've got the status. What is that other one called? All right, that's my number of guesses. Guess status, total guesses. So that has to be cleared, and I'm not clearing that right now. Now, the problem with that is I don't want to clear that number out. I only want to clear it out when I'm all done. All right. So in other words, when I do a new game, I want to clear that. But other than that, I don't want to clear that value out. That's my number of guesses. So where is my new game here? In here. All right, I'm calling clear the form, and I am setting total guesses. All right. So maybe it was working the way it should have. Let's check. That's what it should be doing. And now when I click new game, this should disappear. And it is. So as far as I can tell, everything is now working. So you have, for your test tomorrow, you've got about a half dozen or more programs that now implement event listeners, the adding event listeners and arrow functions. You will be expected to do that tomorrow. You are going to literally get the page that has errors in it. You have to discover and fix each one of those errors and make sure that if you've got functions that are not being created as arrow functions, that you change them to arrow functions. And if you have event listeners that should be being set that are not being set, that you set them. All right. So that will be tomorrow. I will have the test emailed out to you by 7 a.m. I will go over it during our regular class time between 8:05 a.m. and 8:20 a.m. You'll have the rest of the day to work on it. It will be due by the end of the day. All right. And again, what scares me is there are a couple people in this class who are way behind. And it's not going to be that easy to catch up. Plus, you have to be very cognizant of the fact that if you're turning in stuff late, you're going to lose points. All right. And if you think that's unfair, there are, I'll give you my boss's email if you want it. You can go complain to him. That's your right. All right. But that's literally all I have today. And on Thursday, then we'll go over at least chapter 6. And if there's time, we'll go over both chapter 6 and chapter 7. Chapter 7 is only about 15 pages long. It's a short chapter. 6 on DOM, the document object model, is fairly long. All right, that's all I had for today. I'm going to right now update my GitHub repository. It'll be back out there under the same name it was yesterday. It'll be out there in about 10 minutes, and I will put the video for this tape out there hopefully within 20 or 30 minutes. All right, have a good rest of the day. I will talk to you tomorrow at 8:05. See you then.